They say wars end when the guns go silent. But sometimes, the war just changes its uniform. In 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II, Paris glittered with new life. Cafes overflowed with laughter, jazz echoed in the night, and the people tried to forget the darkness that once ruled their streets. Yet in a tall glass building on Rue Saint-Honore, something far colder was being born. A man named Adrian Mercer adjusted his tie as he entered the boardroom of a brand new financial institution. Mercury Trust Holdings. To the public, it was just another investment firm promising to rebuild Europe. But Adrian knew the truth. He wasn't just rebuilding the world, he was owning it. The walls of the room were lined with maps, not of nations, but of currencies. Gold reserves, exchange routes, bank mergers, all connected by red lines. At the center of that web sat the emblem of a golden serpent biting its own tail. Adrian's voice was calm as he spoke to the gathered investors. Gentlemen, war has changed. The battlefield is now the market. Victory belongs to those who can price it. One of the men across the table, a British officer turned banker named Colonel Hargrove, leaned forward. And what of the assets, Mr. Mercer? The reserves you promised? Adrian smiled faintly. They arrived last night from Zurich. The gold is clean, the ledgers are new, and our past stays buried, but buried things don't always stay silent. That night, as rain lashed against his office windows, Adrian opened an old black ledger, the same one marked Operation Mercury. Inside, a single name had been crossed out, Jean Moreau. Below it, another had been written in red ink, Adrian Mercer. Wasn't just a banker. He was Marc, Jean's brother, the man who supposedly died in the explosion beneath the French tunnels. The blast hadn't killed him, it had reborn him. Marc had shed his old name and forged a new identity with the help of men who once served both sides of the war. He had survived with only one purpose, to turn the buried gold of Operation Mercury into power. Weeks later, Mercury Trust began moving funds across borders faster than any government could track. Factories rebuilt overnight. Newspapers called it the miracle capital. But behind the headlines, thousands of war-torn assets quietly vanished from government vaults. One morning, a file appeared on Adrian's desk. No sender, no seal, just a note written in pencil. Gold never dies. He froze. That was the same line Jean had written before the tunnels exploded. For the first time in years, Marc, now Adrian, felt fear creep into his chest. He ordered his secretary to trace the letter. Within hours, she returned pale. Sir, it was delivered by a postman. No name, no address. That night, Adrian sat alone, turning the message over and over. His reflection in the window looked older now, haunted. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and whispered, "You're dead, Jean. You can't come back." But outside, in the rain-soaked street, a man watched the lights from the Mercury Trust Tower. His coat collar hid a long scar across his cheek. The fire hadn't killed him either. Jean Moreau was alive. For months, he had followed the money trail, from the ashes of Operation Mercury to Swiss accounts and offshore funds hidden in the shadows of global banks. Each account led back to one name, Mercury Trust Holdings. Jean realized his brother's vision had come true. The war had evolved into something more silent, more dangerous. Now, nations didn't fight for land. They fought for balance sheets. Jean decided to strike back. Not with weapons, but with truth. He began leaking small pieces of data, coded letters sent to journalists, hidden symbols carved into newspaper ads. He wanted the world to see what Mercury Trust really was, a machine built on blood gold. But the hunters became the hunted. One night, as Jean moved through an abandoned printing warehouse, he heard footsteps. A voice echoed through the darkness, calm and familiar. "Still chasing ghosts, little brother?" Jean froze, turned slowly. Adrian stepped from the shadows, immaculate in his suit, holding a pistol at his side. The two brothers stared at each other, the past burning silently between them. "You survived," Adrian said softly. "You always were stubborn. You built an empire on the bones of the dead," Jean replied. "You called it progress." Adrian's eyes hardened. "I called it survival. Nations needed rebuilding. I simply made sure the gold wasn't wasted." Jean shook his head. He turned it into chains. Adrian took a step closer. The world doesn't care who owns the gold, Jean, only that someone does. You think governments run this planet? No, banks do, and I control them. Jean's voice was low but steady, sound just like the men you used to hate. A long silence filled the room. Rain hammered the roof. Adrian's hand trembled for a moment, then he lowered the gun. I didn't want this war between us, he whispered. But maybe the war was never ours to end. Before Jean could answer, a red light blinked above the door. Alarms erupted. Armed men stormed in private security, faces masked. Adrian's own creation had turned on him. Someone higher had taken notice. He shouted orders, but the guards didn't obey. They seized both brothers, dragging them toward the rooftop. A helicopter waited in the storm. From inside, a woman stepped out, elegant, sharp-eyed, her voice smooth as steel. Gentlemen, Mercury Trust thanks you for your service. But assets must be liquidated. Adrian's face went pale. You can't, Mr. Mercer, she interrupted. You built a system you no longer control. The serpent always eats its tail. The last thing Jean remembered was the sound of the rotors, then the blinding flash of gunfire. When he awoke, he was lying on the riverbank at dawn. The helicopter was gone. The tower of Mercury Trust burned in the distance. In his hand was a small golden serpent pin, the same emblem his brother once wore. Engraved beneath it were 3 words, the fun lives. Jean disappeared that morning. No one saw him again. Months later, global markets shifted overnight. Stocks fell, banks merged, currencies trembled. Somewhere in the chaos, a new organization appeared under a quiet name, the Fund of Shadows. No one knew who ran it. But every deal, every investment, seemed to follow one hidden pattern, the same pattern from the ledger of Operation Mercury. And somewhere across the ocean, a man with a familiar scar and a quiet voice mailed another letter. Inside was a single gold coin and a message written in fading ink. The war for money has only begun. They buried the truth under vaults of gold. The gold never stays buried for long. Yes. Subscribe to uncover the next secret from the shadows of history.